Welcome to this week's edition of Black Authors Matter TV, where we interview the latest movers and shakers in the African American literary community. You'll meet some old friends, discover new ones, and stay abreast of the latest book developments around the country and even the world. So sit back and relax for the next 2 hours with Black Authors Matter TV co-hosts Gwen Richardson and Dr. Rhonda Lawson.
Well, hello and welcome to the July 26th edition of Black Authors Matter TV. I'm Gwen Richardson. I'm your host for tonight, and my co-host Rhonda Lawson will be joining us soon in our second half of the show. She had a meeting she had to attend, so she will be with us shortly. Welcome to the show. For those who are new, we welcome you, and for those who repeat, we welcome you as well. Last week, Rhonda and I were in Philadelphia at the Zeta Phi Beta Boule, selling our books. Rhonda was mostly in meetings because she's on the board. So, but I had a great time, sold a lot of books, and met a lot of people. And so that was very exciting. So I wanted to tell you all, we're celebrating our 2-year anniversary tonight. That's right. Black Authors Matter TV has been a live show every Tuesday for 2 years. And we are extremely excited about our longevity. Not everybody can say that they kept a show going, and it's been consistent every single week. So we're excited about that. And because of that, we're going to be giving away a special prize tonight, but we're not going to do it until the second half of the show. And what we're doing for that prize is the reward is that the person who guesses the answer to the question we'll be asking first will be able to get any book they want that's in print that's $50 or less. They can just tell us which book, and we will, it could be any book. We will have it shipped directly to the person, but they have to answer the trivia question first. We have 2 books to give away tonight. We're going to do that in the second half of the show as well when Rhonda's here. So we're going to have our first guest come on, and her name is Rita Fierro, and she's logged in twice, so I'm not sure which one of these she wants us to admit her for. But Rita is an author, a speaker, and an African American studies professor. And she also, I'm going to admit them both, and then she can cancel whichever one she wants. She has a book called Digging Up the Seeds of White Supremacy. And she currently lives between Philadelphia, where I was last week with Rhonda, and her ancestral home in Italy. So we're excited to have Dr. Rita on the show to talk about her book and to talk about her journey to being having a doctorate in African American studies, what led her to that, and then talking about her book. So Dr. Rita, welcome to Black Authors Matter TV.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
You're welcome. So first, tell us about your book. It just came out, it looks like May 25th, so it's a new book. And it's called Digging Up the Seeds of White Supremacy. And just what made you decide to write the book? And what do you use as your foundation for the information that's in the book?
I've been studying systemic racism for the past 30 years. The journey started for me when I started a master's in sociology. The academic journey started for a master's in sociology. The personal journey started at age 4 when I was under the table at a family dinner and I heard someone speak from racial hatred for the first time in my life. And it just felt like someone had just punched me in the stomach. And I argue that as whites, when we're children, we know what's wrong and we can feel it in our bodies. But somehow we are educated and taught to stop feeling. And although this had been a lifetime commitment for me, when George Floyd was murdered 2 years ago, I kind of felt like I had been cut at my knees, not because I was surprised by the outcome, but because unfortunately we've seen so many other Black lives ended prematurely because of the impact of systemic racism and in particular of policing. But what made it earth-shattering for me is that I felt like if I who had been learning for 30 years about systemic racism and wasn't surprised, didn't have really a platform to speak on or a way to actually make a difference and have things change, then had I wasted my whole life by just reading books and studying books. And then suddenly I started noticing this conversation shifting away from personal racism and more towards systemic racism. And in particular, the young folk talk about dismantling white supremacy in our systems. And what I noticed is that the way the conversation was happening had me just really terrified for our young folk. Because what I thought that I saw was a whole generation feeling like they wanted to fight an enemy that I didn't feel they actually knew. And so I wrote the book with the intent of mapping out the system and how the way all the different systems are connected. It does an overview of 10 different systems. So criminal justice, family law, legal, so the legal perspective, and then health, education, immigration, social services, child welfare, mental health. So it maps out 10 different systems and how they're all connected, and how the history shows us how systems not only have perpetuated oppression, but they also adapt over time, so that the more we try to change them, the more they stay the same. And it's designed as a manual for the next generation that's going to have to ask itself even tougher questions maybe than we have, to be able to pick it up and not have to study 30 years, but actually pick up from kind of where I'm leaving off, which is know your enemy, know what you're fighting, and know that the enemy is designed to break you down and burn you out. So take care of yourself in the process, because the struggle is long.
Okay, when you were 4 years old and you heard some words that were impactful, were you in the United States or were you in Italy?
I was in the United States. I was born and raised in the Bronx. Yeah, my parents decided to move to Italy when I was older. My first 10 years, I was in the Bronx, yes.
Oh, okay. And was this like over a family dinner or something, like conversation, just candid, normally just conversational situation where people are just normally talking and then the words just come out naturally?
Unfortunately, yes, it was the 80s. So it was a conversation against affirmative action. And there was a person at the dinner table who was white and was claiming that the person of color had been promoted above them. And my mother, who has always been a truth teller, just looked them straight in the eye and said, "But you don't have a college education. So if you wanted to have a career, you needed to have a college education. This has nothing to do with race." And I just remember the back and forth there between the two.
Okay, that's interesting that you should say that, because what is known widely in Black professional settings or among Black professionals is normally we have to be overqualified for most positions in corporate and in academia or in nonprofits or government. Normally, excuse me, we have to be overqualified.
Absolutely.
So often people have said that, now I've been self-employed for many years. So what I tell people, because of that, I haven't dealt with direct racism in the workplace, because, I was doing the hiring. I had white people working for me. When I was hiring people, I stopped doing it because I needed to move to a different phase of my life. But that's one benefit of being self-employed. is that now, there's other racism, but I really haven't had from clients, I haven't had that that I know of. I guess if they were, they wouldn't have used my services. so, so
Yeah.
but I know that this problem has been a problem from day one. What we were freed and laws were changed, but you still can't necessarily change attitudes and people's perceptions and people's willingness to take direction. Because if you can be promoted to a position, but if the people that you're in charge of won't accept your direction, then you can't succeed at even managing people.
Yes, and I would add that the system adapted in a way to stay racist after the 60s in a way that we can't hold it accountable. So the laws that were passed allow us to hold accountable two people who discriminate against folks of color in the same office under the same circumstances. So what's always been tricky since the 60s and 70s is proving, right? Like there have been lots of blind studies, there have been lots of advocacy work around doing like a housing advocate, going with as close as a profile as possible as a person of color and noticing housing discrimination, right? So it's hard to prove, but not impossible. Hard, but not impossible. Yet if we look at how our systems shifted, I argue, and I mentioned this in the book, that if we look at our systems, there is a separate system to handle folks who are poor, and there's a separate system to handle folks who are middle class or rich. And folks of color always get trapped in the system that was designed for the poor, or most of the time, more frequently get trapped into the system designed for the poor. So we can't hold accountable two separate government offices for discriminating, because you're channeled into two different processes, two different sets of criteria, and so on and so forth. So just as an example, the whole split between SSI and so-called welfare or family assistance was a specific decision to not support women who had not been married. So the reason why SSI, no one comes to knock on your door to find out what your morals are or whether you're working or not, but SSI is fairly easy and fairly quick, is that it was designed for people, for what were called the worthy widows, which were the women who were honorable in their sexual practices, who had been married, and so then they could be taken care of. Versus in the case of family assistance, it was known that there were poor women. And then with the end of discrimination in the 60s and 70s, it became Black women were able to access those funds, which they were not able to access before. And so now you have whole government systems legislating to basically harm Black families, but we can't prove discrimination because they're separate government offices.
So in your book, what do you hope to achieve in bringing this to light, the systemic part of the racism in your book? And that's my first question. What do you hope to do? What do you hope your book does? And then my second question is, what has been the response to your book so far?
So what I hope the book to do is a few things. So one is, I think oftentimes when we do the big picture thinking, we get very overwhelmed. And by we, I mean in particular progressives. So I'm not trying to change the minds of the hardcore folks who are denying systemic racism with this book. What I'm hoping to do is have people who are liberal and progressives, especially white and white liberal and progressives get deeper in their understanding. So for us to basically have a way to look ourselves in the mirror and get more real about how are we supporting the system and how are we supporting white supremacy by looking at how am I acting and thinking superior in the most minute aspects of my life, right? Like, how is it that fear is driving my life? Because basically fear was embedded in all of the systems. It's in it. And as humans, we don't have to choose from fear. So the first thing I'd like to see is to see people wake up to our personal power and recognize that the system was created by human beings and human beings can change the sucker, right? It doesn't have to stay the way it is. Seeing the big picture doesn't have to disempower us. Seeing the bigger picture doesn't have to render us hopeless. Seeing the bigger picture can actually bring us together and get us more determined in our movement building and more alive about what's possible and something else. Second is that we get really clear as human beings in general, and I say whites a lot because I'm white, so I try to stay in my lane because I know there are plenty of folks who are working in the Black community and other folks of color to undo the work there. But we have to get really clear about how we've drank the Kool-Aid, right? Like, we believe that we are powerless and we believe that there's no other way. And we believe that the system is the only way. And by doing that, we actually reinforce it. So we can, if we shift our personal work and we shift beyond fear in our personal work, we can also shift beyond fear in our movement building, in our collective work, and the system will necessarily shift if we do that. So one quick analogy before I shift.
Okay.
The analogy I use is a tree, where systems are basically branches of the same tree. And I argue that when we talk about changing systems, we're talking about branches, but we haven't really dealt with the trunk and the roots. So a 600-year-old tree or 550-year-old tree is there because it's been nourished. So the soil is bringing nutrients to it. You can try to cut out one branch at a time, which for a 500-plus-year-old tree takes a really, really long time. Or if you change the nutrients in the soil, it will just die. So if we shift our culture and the ways in which superiority and competition and so-called professionalism and scarcity are ruling our society, the tree will have to die. It has no other option.
Okay. Now, how has the response been to your book?
It's been extremely positive. I mean, of course, I have Trump supporters in my life because we all do. Like, I have some people who are right-wingers who have had a real big issue around the word white supremacy and using the word white supremacy, but haven't actually read it and probably won't. But for the most part, the people who have been reading it, who are the ones the book was designed to talk to, which are liberals and progressives that are ready to take their activism and take their work to the next level, it's been extremely positive. Mainly because what people are saying is that it allows a connection between the personal work and the historical work in a way that really allows it to come together. And it allows us to see the design of the whole thing. So for the folks who were surprised after the death of George Floyd about how cruel the system is, it's an eye-opener as to, no, it was actually designed to this. It's not broken. It's never been broken. It was designed, unfortunately, to dehumanize. And unless we shift those core principles of our society and the core principles of how we operate, it will continue to operate that way.
Okay, now our viewers want to see the cover of the book. Do you have it with you?
Right here. Yay.
Okay. Okay, so you have some digging up roots. So you have the picture is I guess it's like a metaphor, but not really even a metaphor because you're actually digging up roots. And what plant is that? Is that a particular plant?
It is, but I had it blurred out so that it wouldn't be a particular plant
Okay,
intentionally.
okay. Okay.
But I think originally, I'm trying to remember what it was. Was it? I think it was like some type of turnip originally, and I didn't want it to be a specific.
Okay. You don't want to.
So it's got its lines a little blurred here. Yeah.
Okay. Now I have another question, and this is the question that I've always had for people who are white that talk about white supremacy. And my question is, what is the advantage or incentive for white people to give up their advantage?
Love this
That's the
question.
thing. There's not, I mean, if you have an advantage in anything, it can be in this particular case is economics or political or the whole system. But if you have an advantage, you have a built-in advantage. You have an advantage by design in a particular system. Then what is your motivation? Not you, but your in general for doing something different, because then you won't have an advantage. And, so why would you do that?
I love this question.
Okay.
I would argue
I just don't think people, a person has to really be in a different mindset to do something like that. And most people don't want to give up their advantage. So how can we correct it?
So I would argue that the advantage is definitely in job opportunities and monetarily and health, right? Like there are aspects when we talk about the advantage that white folk have over everyone else, we're looking at these tangible, like, better health results, better higher incomes, better housing conditions, and all the different ways that we know whites are favored in American society. I would argue that racism doesn't just hurt folks of color, but that it's hurting white folks as well, and that white folks are dying at similar rates. So when I look at white supremacy, what I would say that it's doing to white folk is that, an example, youth of color and white youth are killing at similar rates. White youth are killing themselves, youth of color are killing each other. But suicide rates among white youth actually match homicide rates among Black youth. If we look at the rates at which mental health issues are increasing, if we look at the instances of heart attacks among white men, to me, what white supremacy is doing is it puts white folk in a constant, and I'm not immune from this, I have to check myself around it all the time. It makes life for us about performance, because we have to prove that we're superior. And our experience in our families is that if we don't perform, we're not loved. And so there's a wound underneath that has us not empathize with folks of color, that has us not activate and not build movements, but we're also hurting. And in the sentence of one of my mentors, you have to be enslaved to enslave another. If we had been really free, if white people had been really free, we would have had no need to enslave another. Enslavement only happened, like if we're, and we can just think about this in our everyday lives, like if we're free and you're in front of a tropical island, like the first impression is like, let me lie on the sand or let me eat some good fruit. It's not like, oh yeah, let me have you become my slave. So I would argue that we have to be more honest as white folk about the ways in which we're being harmed by our attempt to be superior at all costs. I think it's ruining our relationships. The number of white folk I know that have been cut off from family members or cut off other family members is outrageous. We know we don't have a sense of community. We walk in the world believing that we can do it all alone, and sooner or later that will come to bite you. We may have more money, but I don't think we have a better quality of life. And I think actually that's why white folk are so captivated by hip hop and urban culture, and because we can see that there's a sense of community and aliveness that folks of color have that we actually don't have.
So that's interesting, a very interesting take. We don't often hear honest commentary on this topic that's not coming from a place of guilt or being wounded. Because if someone's guilt-ridden, that they're not going to help you either. I mean, that's never helpful. And that's not racial. That's in relationships, or people make bad decisions when they're operating from a point of guilt. And so, but you instead brought up some realistic points that people may not have realized about the performance thing. You're the first person that I've heard express that in such a way that it makes sense. So that's much appreciated. Now, I wanted to welcome our co-host to the show. I guess her meeting let out sooner than she thought. So she's on the show. Welcome, Dr. Rhonda. I told them that we were in Philadelphia last week. And Rita, our guest, she lives in Philadelphia. So I don't know if you knew about the convention of the Zeta Phi Beta sorority last week in Philadelphia, Rita, but there were thousands of Zetas there. And I'm not a Zeta, but I'm there selling my books. So it was a lot going on.
I'm sure you saw that blue and white around the city.
And Dr. Pam Perry was telling me that you guys have been doing this for 20 years. So you're creating an institution here. I honor that. It takes something to have continuity over 20 years.
Well, this show is just 2 years old. But the other activities that we do is 20 plus. Let me say that. Maybe Rhonda may not be a 20 plus yet, but I am.
I honor that. It takes something.
Do you teach African American studies, or your degrees in African? I know your degree is in African American studies. Have you ever taught the subject?
I have. I started out while I was working on my PhD. I taught 3 semesters of African American history, and that's kind of like the seed of this work. Because although it kind of came together as a labor of love that was very intense and very relatively quick, because I've taught history in the past, it was really rooted in the buildup and the understanding of learning African American history from the perspective of African American authors, right? So in fact, if you read the book, it's really kind of based on the Du Boisian approach and Paula Giddens and just all the phenomenal Black scholars who have been analyzing systemic racism, naming it and criticizing it, critiquing it, and I would also say detecting it, right? Like really in many different subtle ways over centuries.
Now, when you were teaching, what was the makeup of your class? Like, were the students mostly Black, or was it a mixture? And what was it, at a PWI, or was it an HBCU, or what kind of institution?
It was at Temple University, which is where I have my PhD.
Okay.
And I had diverse classes. I would say about a predominantly African American, probably either depending on the class in the year, I would say either 3/4 African American or half and half. Like half African American and Latino and half white.
Okay. Now, I have one final question, unless Rhonda has a question. Do you have any questions?
No, I'm just listening. I didn't want to jump in the middle.
Oh, okay. It was something in your bio that I read. You come from a long line of traditional healers. Talk about that.
Yeah. So one of the big gifts for me of getting a PhD in African American studies is that it allowed me to understand the demonization of Southern Italian culture, which is where I'm from. I'm originally, my ancestry is from Southern Italy, and I lived in Southern Italy half of my life. But because I moved from the Bronx, New York, super cool Bronx, to small town Italy, I really hated it here. And I really hated it in Southern Italy. And I had a lot of judgment about it being backward, right? About it being uncivilized. Like I had a lot of judgments that I learned over the years is how we've demeaned indigenous cultures around the world, in particular in African-American culture. And so studying African-American studies and studying traditional healing in Africa, I also traveled a lot to Africa and have done work in Africa over the years, allowed me to kind of come back to Southern Italian culture and see and recognize all and have language for all the ways that Southern Italian culture is actually indigenous. And so there's a long line of traditional healers in Southern Italy that were called witches, and the networks of those traditional healers were destroyed through the witch hunts of Italy. I'm from a place called Benevento that has the same reputation of Salem in the United States. It's known to be the town of witches because it was a place where traditional healers from all around Europe would gather once a year. And there was a confluence from the Celts, from the north, and those who worshipped Isis. Benevento has three temples to Isis, or in the antique world had 3 temples to Isis. And one of the theories is that these were priestesses of Isis who outlived Christianity, and then Christianity demonized as witches. And my grandparents practiced a kind of traditional healing that was called enchanting. It's a combination of ritual and prayers, very joined with Christianity, very deeply connected to their Christian tradition, but also that hinted to something else, like also that hinted to a tradition that's probably a lot even more ancient than Christianity on this land. And so that sensitized me to healing in general, was in particular my relationship with my grandmother.
Okay. Well, we're at the end of our time. I opened a topic that we could have spent another 30 minutes on.
Right. You opened a can of worms with that one.
You did.
If you can show your book cover again, to let people know, the book is called Digging Up the Seeds of White Supremacy. It's by Dr. Rita Fierro. Is that the correct pronunciation? And
that's correct.
She has a PhD in African American Studies, and she studies and researches this topic, and she's giving us a lot of food for thought. So thank you for being a guest on Black Authors Matter TV, and continued success with letting people know, spreading the word, opening eyes, opening hearts on this topic.
Thank you for having me. It was a real honor.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so as I said, at the top of the show, we're going to be having, we're giving away 2 books, and we're having our grand prize for celebrating our 2nd anniversary. We have a particular prize for that, but we're going to do that after this next interview with Vanessa Riley. And so we're going to do both of those things at the 8 o'clock hour or 9 o'clock hour if you're on the East Coast. And so just be ready. And we have on the screen Vanessa Riley. She's been on the show before. She was on with her book Island Queen, and she has a brand new book that just came out called Sister, Mother, Warrior. So welcome back to Black Authors Matter TV. And we need you to unmute.
So thank you so much. I'm on location, if you guys can tell. We're heading all the way to DC. Got to see some family along the way, so I'm broadcasting from a hotel.
Oh, well, that happens on this show quite often, because the people that we talk to, they're active and doing all kinds of things. They might be on a movie set, or the lady we had a couple of weeks ago, she had been on the road doing 2 months of research on finding on sunset towns. So that was an interesting topic. So you have a brand new book out, and what I want to know is, because the other book was just out Well, it came out in 2020 though, didn't it? The other book, the
It-
Island Queen.
2021, last
It
year.
came out in 2021. It was last year.
In other words, you've been very, very busy.
Yeah, you have been very
Yeah.
busy. Yes, and this book is the other. Island Queen was thick. It was like
Yes, it was very
450,
thick.
500 pages. And Sister Mother Warrior is.
Now, were
So
you
this-
working on both of these books at the same time?
Nope.
So you just put a lot of time into the books. Now, what is your process? How do you go about doing that? Because I'm quite
Lot of
sure
work.
that the next book is quite as thick as Island Queen did.
It is. Because we had a advanced reading copy that we gave away a couple of weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago.
Yes, that's right.
Mhm.
That's right.
We did.
Yeah. You guys, I write every day. I'm a pretty good plotter, so I work from a timeline of what has to be in the book and what happens. And I'm very methodical, so I just get in and do it. Writing for me is a muscle. And if you exercise it every day, it
Absolutely.
will perform for you. If you don't, if you skip it, your body, your mind, all of that realizes you can get out of it. So, that television show will be more interesting. The conversation on the phone will be more interesting. Everything will pull at you and keep you from putting your words out. So I get very methodical. I'm in it to win it. And I do what I got to do. Which means long books for you guys.
Yeah.
No, there's nothing wrong with a long book because
No,
you
it's
keep
not.
people's attention. And that's now there will be something wrong with the book if you couldn't keep our attention, but you're keeping our attention and you're very character driven with your stories. So how do you do that? How are you able to put so much detail and so much depth into your characters?
I do a lot of research. So I have literally a timeline that goes from 1750 to 1830, and it has just about everything that's happened in the world, but not just from a European perspective, but what's happening in the islands, on the various colonies. And then everybody who's doing trade. So I know what's happening in England, Spain, and Portugal, and France, and those darn Americans who show up in 1776. Because unfortunately, we're not taught about these very strong people, and to bring them back to us. Because the funny thing is, all the women I've done so far are famous during their time frame. They're worldwide known,
Yes.
but yet we don't know it. And one of the most heartfelt things for me is the book launched. I went to the Atlanta History Center, and a woman from Port-au-Prince, Haiti was there. And she was like, we know the men. We never get to hear about the women. And I'm just excited to bring that back. Because when we know that our story is not just enslavement and not just the pain of enslavement, but it's also people who persevered, who were resilient, who found a way to keep going. We need to know their names.
So I know you're on location. Do you have a copy of your book with you?
It's in the car, of course not.
Okay. Well, maybe Rhonda can put it in the comments at least so people can see the cover.
I'm so pitiful. I'm so sorry. And it's a gorgeous cover. Let me see if I have one on my iPad. It is an absolute gorgeous cover by the same artist who did Island Queen. So Tanya Engel did that.
And while you're looking for that, I didn't realize this. Facebook tells you if somebody is an anniversary follower of our show. And Rhonda McKnight, there's a designation on her name, her comment, that she's an anniversary follower. And she said, she said that amazing. You have other books releasing too. She said you have 4 books this year. Do you have 4 books coming out this year?
Yeah. So it sounded like a good idea at the beginning, right? In March was the final book in the Rogues and Remarkable Women series, A Duke, a Spy, an Artist, and a Lie. And then in June was the paperback version of Island Queen that came out, because originally last year it came out in hardcover. It's now available in paperback. So, those who, your budget's a little tight, but you want to get on, you want to jump on this, I've visited a lot of Barnes and Nobles. They have Island Queen in paperback. So go out and get it. We just had, once again, Sister Mother Warrior, and so I'm gonna lift this up. Can y'all see that?
Oh, okay, yeah, that's beautifully done.
So that's
And that
Abidoya
cover
Toya.
was, yeah, that cover
like
was
it.
on the advanced reading copy, because sometimes the advanced reading copy cover is not the same as the final cover, but in this case it was. So we always ask a trivia question, and I think the trivia question for this one was what country was the main character part of the revolution of what country? So they had to answer that. The first person to answer that got the book. I don't remember who it was, but it's probably one of our regular viewers. And also, we have people who are top, because this is our second anniversary show.
Congratulations, ladies.
2 years today we've had this show.
Yes.
We have some people that are designated as top fans of the show. Tony Bonita, she's on one of the top
every week.
fans. Dr.
Mama
Velma
Tony.
Granby is also designated as one. Mary Evans, she has a designation as a top fan. And I don't know, Sherry Carthane, who is my good friend in Houston, she's designated as a milestone follower. I don't know what that means, but she has that designation. So
Facebook be rolling out some new things. I like this.
Yeah, they are.
Awesome.
And I don't know if it's because it's only when you do Facebook Live, because I haven't seen it on other Facebook things. So tell us about the Sister Mother Warrior, and just what's the
but to finish your last question, there's one more book coming out this year.
Oh, okay.
That's my first. I know it's funny.
Okay.
That is Murder in Westminster. It's my first hardcover mystery. So that rounds you out.
Okay. And you put out hardcover books. It's not a lot of people that look like us doing all these hardcovers. In the same year, it's not common. Let me say that. Not multiples in the same.
And you're
year.
putting your books out in different formats. You have your audio books, the paperback, the hardback, Kindle.
And Kindle. Yep.
Now, are you writing? Well, I was gonna say, are you writing full time now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm a full-time writer. So always will be an engineer, but I am now. This is taken over, and
I was gonna ask,
a wonderful life.
How did you make a segue from being mechanical? You have a doctorate in mechanical engineering. How did you end up writing historical romances and just epic historical fiction? How did you go from there to industrial? Then you're in industrial engineering too, from Stanford.
Yeah, I got a lot of degrees. I want see how that one. Okay, y'all realize you've outed me. I'm the nerd girl, right? So it's not any nth degree. Oh yeah, let me just sign up and get 4 of them. That's just gotta be.
I have to tell myself not to get another degree. I keep reminding myself I have enough, but every time I see something like, oh, I should get that. I'm here with you.
You can't help it when you love education, when you love learning.
Yes.
You cannot help yourself, and I've not helped myself a lot. But back in high school, I was very good at writing. I won a lot of competitions, but I was also good at math. And my mama sat me down. She's like, baby, you always need to be able to pay your bills.
Yeah.
And at that time, it was a minute before we had Zora, and then it was like nothing, right? And even to, with romances, it was just Beverly Jenkins, it was just Brenda Jackson. It didn't look like that would be a viable career, and paying bills is very important. And she was absolutely right. Engineering pays a lot of bills. So thank you, Mama. It was good. But when you have a passion for something, it doesn't go away. And I don't care how many technical reports I write. I had my boss was like, this is really too exciting for die-cast manufacturing. You need to turn it down a little bit. But your passion comes back, and there are seasons for things. This is the season for my writing, and I'm just super excited.
Beautiful, beautiful. And then living that season.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You have to
Absolutely.
seize the moment because, you know,
Absolutely.
sometimes the stars align and just everything is in place. You have favor and you're in the right place at the right time, and you may not get that chance again. So you have to take advantage of it at that time when
I'm
it's
gonna
available.
go for it. I'm gonna put everything I got into every book like it's my last book, so that y'all will always have a solid, decent, exciting book that you're gonna learn something from coming from Vanessa.
Well, that
Absolutely.
shows in your work. That
Thank
really
you.
does show. So tell us about Sister Mother Warrior and the Haitian Revolution that is described in this book.
Okay. Well, y'all remember this little movie that came out a couple years ago? I think it was called Black Panther, and everybody was running around going Wakanda forever and all this funny stuff. A friend of mine told me that the Dora Milaje was modeled after a true African tribe. And I was like, for real, women warriors? I hadn't heard that. And so I started doing research, and I found that the Minos, the second tier brides of the king of the tribe of Dahomey, were these warriors. These were fierce women. They led the battle. The Europeans were frightened by these women. They were trained to feel no pain. These were some bad mamas. And one of these Dahomey women, one of these Minos, was named Abadoya Toya. She gets captured in battle, and she ends up being sold to a plantation in Saint Domingue, which is present day Haiti. Because she also has a gift for knowing how to do the herbs, the death rates are so high in Saint Domingue, not just because of mass cruelty, but because of the diseases that are prevalent and the bugs. But because she knew plants, she knew the types of oils to put on the baby's mouths to keep them from getting lockjaw so they wouldn't latch on. And they gave her additional privileges. And what Abadoya does is she uses that to exercise the children. But if you're not looking carefully, she's teaching these children to march. She's teaching these children troop movement. And one young man she pours in particular is called Jean-Jacques Dessalines. Jean-Jacques Dessalines is the man who liberates Haiti. He defeats the world power of the French. He didn't go to West Point. He was taught everything about military prowess from Abadoya Toya, this Dahomey warrior. This woman was so powerful, but to tell a story, at least in my opinion, you got to balance the power with something else. And so as I'm now studying Jean-Jacques' timeline, and I find a woman named Mary Claire Bonner, who happens to be his wife. She is the first battlefield nurse. In 1800, literally 1800, she leads a group of women in white on a mule train. Now, first of all, I don't want to critique people's outfits, but you white on a mule is not exactly something I would do. But this is what this woman did. And she goes because she has a hunger to feed the people. There was a mass earthquake in her hometown in 1770. And from that point on, she and her mom, they would go and they'd feed people. So when she found out about Jacmel, the Battle of Jacmel, that people were starving, she couldn't stand down. So she takes these young women with her, and they're on a mule train, and she believes that both sides are gonna stop fighting for her to come and fix up, bind up wounds. And now that's a lot of faith. I ain't say I got that kind of faith. She had that kind of faith. And they literally stopped fighting, and she's on the field. She doesn't care if it was the enemy side or the indigenous side. She's binding up wounds. This predates Mary Seacole and Florence Nightingale. We should know Mary Claire's name. And Mary Claire Bonner marries Jean-Jacques Dessalines. So Jean-Jacques now has on both sides of him peace and power. And those two forces help shape this revolution.
How did you, since what years is this covering?
This goes from 1758 to 1806.
So what do you use for your research? I mean, did you go to Haiti?
No, that pandemic thing took away my traveling in certain countries. It's just now starting to open up, and it's coming back again. Why can't we get the world straight? so that we could just
Every time we
but
think we have it under control, something happens.
something happens. And you're ruining my travel plans. But I do I do first research. So I go and I find all the story books and see what they say, and then I chase, the bibliographies in the back of that. I literally found a guy named Thomas Matteo. He interviewed Mary Claire 10 years after the revolution, so it's one of the freshest accounts. Unfortunately, it was all in French, so that was a joy.
Oh.
But no, it wasn't, girl. It was horrible. This is when my friends were like, "Can you stop whining, please? It's your fault. You don't want." But anywho, from this, you get like you wouldn't learn from normal places that Jean-Jacques Dessalines likes to dance, that he loves the drums. You learn things about Mary Claire, her love of ice cream. I mean, it's like all these little things that you wouldn't in the normal history books, but that adds such flavor to a manuscript, because these people were human, had human desires,
Right.
human fears, foibles. And I want you to be like you're in the room and watching this. So I want to know this. This is almost as good as if I could interview them. And I want you to feel like you're there. So you get the politics of the day. I even do the different languages, because the Dahomey spoke Fawn in Saint Domingue, which once again is Haiti. You've got Creole, you've got French. Sometimes you get a little British in there, or English. And then you also have the different African West Coast tribes. So you get Twi and Yorubese. It's all a blend. And so at different times I will bring in some of these other languages, because I want you to be here. I want you to be there on the battlefield when all of the forces get together and they're united and they go after the French. I want y'all to feel that. And so I just do a lot of research. Like I said, this is comes from my engineering side. I was a very thorough researcher. I will dig to the ends of the earth to answer questions, because I want you to feel like you're there, and I want to honor these people. They lived real. These are real people. They live real lives, and it's a shame we don't know their names. And to honor those who've done so much, because I personally think if young people are in school and they only hear the enslaved narrative, I think that does something to us. They say trauma is in the genes, but when they know that, hey, he came from nothing, he was poured into he listened to his elders, and now he was able to lead the forces to overthrow the French, which was a world power. Think about that. And you think about the women's roles, because Abadora's at 65, she out there fighting, she's leading troops, beating people.
You make such a good point that we seem to embrace the negative or the tragic part of our histories, and we feel like we're less Black if we look at it in a positive way, or everything wasn't sad, everything wasn't a tragedy. I mean, and I'm not saying it didn't happen, but let's also celebrate the positives in our history as well, the beauty of our history. Everything doesn't have to be, oh, poor me, but about let's celebrate me.
Exactly. Jean-Jacques Dessalines and Mary Claire have a long love story. So when we're looking at Black love, they had a long love story that, because of the war and the distances, things happen, et cetera, but it was deep and abiding. And it's something we should know. We know Cleopatra and Caesar. Heck, we know Cleopatra and Mark Antony. We ought to know Mary Claire and Jean-Jacques. We can't wait till Ozzy and Ruby Dee. That's our big love affair that we remember. Okay. No, we need to
Jay-Z
go back.
and Beyonce,
Yeah, Jay-Z and Beyonce, because nobody knows. There's so much richness in our history, and unfortunately, we've bought into pain porn, right? So the enslavement story, and you come up with the craziest versions of what Massa's done, and I'm not saying Massa wasn't crazy, because Massa was crazy, but there are people who survived it, people who found a way to survive. The reason we're here is somebody figured out how to get there.
Well,
And they didn't.
all of us are here because our ancestors figured it out, because the ones that didn't figure it out, they didn't have offspring. I mean, for the most part, the people, that's why I say we should embrace the strength, the genetic pool that we're part of. For one thing, the people that we came from survived the Middle Passage. And that was only like a third of the people, which means they had to be very strong to survive that.
Yes,
But
exactly.
the tragic thing you talked about, what did you call it? Porn? What did you call it?
Pain porn. Pain porn.
That's not from the past. That's now. It just about all the movies and shows that they come out with. Not all of them, but too many of them. When I'm wanting to watch something, when I'm going through the schedule of what's the new shows or whatever, they steer you to the Black programming. And it's almost always a tragic. It's something tragic. And everybody Black is not dealing with tragedy every single day. You know what I mean? We have triumphs too, and we don't. And that's not unnatural. It's not abnormal. It's actually normal. So we don't get to see or hear about it enough. And I love the way you do that with history.
I will tell you that it actually winds up affecting young people's psyche. I mean, I had my daughter tell me that when she first started going to Clark Atlanta, that there were people who made her feel like she wasn't Black enough because she didn't go through a lot of the struggles that maybe some of her fellow students went through. So they made her feel like she wasn't Black enough. She didn't talk Black enough. I was told I didn't talk Black enough when I was growing up. Or because, she wasn't harassed by the police, all of the things that are a part of our culture, or not so much our culture, but a part of our
the
history.
Narrative. It's like the daily or weekly, nightly news narrative or whatever,
Being your resident nerd, there was a lot of chiding, because my mama didn't let us run the streets. My mama said the prom was like, would be my only and first date. I mean, she was extremely strict, but she knew that there was callings on our lives. And she knows that if you do everything that everybody else does, you can get caught out there. I don't know how many gifted, wonderful people happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, and their whole futures are destroyed. So your daughter should be proud that you made sure she didn't see the suffering, that she didn't live that life in the streets, because you know what, people can come out of that and be stronger, but if you can avoid the foolishness. Exactly. You don't have to touch a hot stove to know it's hot.
Absolutely.
You're right. And my daughter now, see, and I don't even understand this. My daughter got it a little bit. But it seems like at HBCU, everybody there is Black, they're upwardly mobile. So why are they trying to act like they're, it's like some people who get into rap that really aren't hard, but they have to put on a front that they're hard because that's what sells. I don't know. But the whole purpose of going to college is to be upwardly mobile. That's why you play. That's why you pay. That's why some people go in tremendous debt, not to wallow in, tragedy.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to make sure that these kids have strong senses of purpose. They got to know who they are and what they're trying to accomplish. And unfortunately, there's hurts, all different types of hurts, all different types of pain. And these kids, it's easy. They want to fit in. So they'll do certain things, or they'll pretend to be a certain type of person so that they'll fit in. And they got to realize, you got to rock your nerd flag.
There's nothing wrong with being a nerd.
It's
nerds rule the world.
Once again,
that's who's running things. The nerds.
And nerds don't be able to pay their bills because my mama was
exactly. Well, unfortunately, we have hit 9 o'clock. Well, 8 o'clock. Well,
Central.
we're on the East Coast, so it's 9
Right.
o'clock for us. But if you can just remind us once again where we can find your book. Tell us. Well, you don't have to tell us more about it because we have really dived into the book this for this past half hour, and I'm looking forward to reading it.
Excellent. VanessaRiley.com is the mothership. You go there, you can join my newsletter, you can see where my events are. All the booksellers. I love indie bookstores. If you go to a indie bookstore and they don't have it, ask them, they'll order it for you. System of the Warrior, Barnes and Noble, System of the Warrior, Amazon, System of the Warrior. Everybody sells System of the Warrior. And once again, Island Queen is now released in paperback version, so it's a little lighter on your pockets. Y'all can get that too. I'm going to a Polycon this weekend up here in DC. I will be giving away ARCs. Y'all
I
are the
want to
first to
see
hear
you
this.
while I'm in you.
Yeah.
I live in DC area. I want to see you. We have to meet.
Yeah, email me after. Y'all got my email. Email
Yeah.
me. We can figure
Yeah,
out
I
how to
got
meet
you.
up. Yeah.
Okay.
But my murder mystery comes out. Murder in Westminster comes out August 30th. I have 50 ARCs with me. So 50 people who come to a Polycon, y'all come to my table, you will get an ARC of Murder in Westminster. You will meet our newest sleuth, woman of color, Lady Abby Worthing. So y'all, it's gonna be a fun series. I get to kill people in that. It's kind of cool.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Vanessa, for returning to the show.
Well, thank you guys for having me. It's always a pleasure.
And helping us celebrate our 2nd anniversary.
Absolutely.
Congratulations, you guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, you have a great evening.
Bye.
Okay. I had said that I was going to give away these books, and I am. So we're going to bring on our next guest.
I thought you were about to give us a excuse why you can't do it.
Oh, no, I'm going to give them away right now. And I hope if our next guest is listening, we're going to bring you on. It might be 2 minutes. But first, we have the book, The Women Could Fly. It's by Megan Giddings.
Yes.
And the trivia question for this book is, in this novel, the state mandates that all women marry by what age? So she will be on the show in a month or so. So with this book, talking about this book, this is an advanced reading copy of The Women Could Fly. So in this novel, the state mandates that all women must marry by what age? The next one is a children's book. It's called Zuri Ray and the Backyard Bash. The author's name is Tammy Charles. Let me see, can you see? Tammy Charles is at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the question for this book, the author, Tammy Charles, lives in what northeastern state? So what state does the author live in?
Okay, Miss Mary Evans has already answered the first question. She said 30 years old.
Okay, that's correct. Mary Evans. She's
so
an anniversary follower. Okay, and yeah, the author of this book lives in what northeastern state? Zuri Ray in the Backyard Bash. And for our special prize, if you answer this, the first person to answer this question correctly, and anybody can answer, gets any book up to a $50 value of any topic that they want. So, and what we'll do, we order the book and have it shipped directly to you. So if you win it, you DM us the book that you want and we will ship it to you as long as it's $50 or less. And that pretty much covers everything. So here's the question. Since the show began, name one of the a book club whose facilitator has been on this show in the last 2 years. And we're going to go over, we're not going to say who won until after this next interview. So you have to name the club that has had a facilitator on this show And there haven't been that many. So name the club and you'll get your $50 book. You'll win it. And that's because we love you all and we want you all to be blessed with all kinds of stuff. So anyway, we are
First of all, y'all are naming people. We said book club.
no,
Stop
it
naming
has to
people.
be the name of the book club. It has to be the name of the club and it has to be correct. So that's a little trickier. It has to be the name of the club. So we welcome to the show Angela Jackson Brown. You came on camera just as we were doing one of our trivia question things. So this pardon us for being in the middle of that. But
that's okay. I was listening to you.
Oh, okay. Okay. So welcome to Black Authors Matter TV. This is our second anniversary tonight that we're celebrating, and we're excited to have you.
I'm excited to be here. Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So you have a new book out that came out a few weeks ago, called The Light Always Breaks, and you have a copy of it there in your hand. And your other book before that, I see it in the background. It's called The Rain. It was in the rain when the stars rain down. The stars rain down. And you do historical fiction. Is that we had another historical fiction person on right before you, Vanessa Riley. And so The Light Always Breaks, but this book is in the 1940s, so it's not centuries ago. It is decades ago, and it's a romance. So tell us about The Light Always Breaks in terms of the plot, and then tell us what inspired you to come up with the story.
Absolutely. So it's being called a romance, and I don't have a problem with that because there is romance involved. It's a young woman in her early 20s. She's a Black woman who lives in Washington, D.C., and she owns a restaurant. And along with being a restaurant owner, she's also heavily involved in the local civil rights movement. I was very fascinated to find just how much of what we think of the 1950s and 60s civil rights movement, so much of it was birthed long before it, particularly in Washington, and particularly among some of the Black people that lived in and around U Street. So that's where her part of the story takes place. And she meets and falls in love, and likewise he with her, a white senator from Georgia. And he's battling his own internal demons of how does he follow his drive to be a politician, but also how does he shift from some of the more racist ideology of the people from his home state, and particularly his own family. Mm-hmm. So yes, there's romance, but there's more so than that. It's both of these individuals trying to find their place in society and using their own privilege and power to change things for their individual communities.
So is their romance a secret romance, or is it in public?
It's a secret in terms of the larger community, but their family and friends, for the most part, are aware of the relationship, and both sides are very much trying to urge them to not follow that path. When I was in college, I read, of course, Nella Larsen's Passing, and I thought about what would a story like that look like, where both people have equal amounts of power, whereas the Black woman is not needing him for a step up. She's already living an affluent life. She stands to lose as much or more than he does. So I wanted them to be equals and not have another book about a Black woman who was in a powerless position, because Eva is definitely not that.
Okay.
That's an interesting take.
Yeah, so she wasn't like a mistress or anything like that. She was his number one.
Absolutely.
Okay.
There was no other wife or girlfriends on his end, and she didn't have anyone in her life. So that was another important part of the story that I wanted to include.
Okay. So is this based on real people or this fictional, totally fictional? Is in your imagination or?
It's both. Those two characters are definitely fictional, but the people that are in their lives are very much historical characters. One of Eva's role models is Mary McLeod Bethune. She is the person that Eva most wants to be like in terms of her activism, in terms of having what we might think of as an early uh, feminist movement. I mean, Mary McLeod Bethune was an amazing trailblazer. I mean, presidents and leaders were listening to her advice on what not just to do for the Black community, but what to do for the community at large. A. Philip Randolph, Adam Clayton Powell Jr. These are all people that are part of the narrative of the story. So it was large parts research, but doing it in a way that I could allow these fictional characters to exist, but not disrupt the narrative line of history.
Oh, it sounds fascinating. And I don't know if I've heard about another, I'm sure there might be one out there, but where what I'm finding now with is more historical fiction coming out from Black authors, it seems like, and it's covering a lot of different periods of time. It's not just one, it's not just slavery period. You know, like in your book, it's the 1940s in Washington. There was another book about, and her name is Kaya Alderson. She was on the show. Her book was about Black women in the military in World War II. Um, there's just so many. I'm just finishing up a book by Leonard Pitts Jr. called The Last Thing You Surrender. It's also about World War II, but it has Black family and a white family and just what their experience is.
And
So
I
it's a
think that
lot
this
being written.
I think this is a great movement
It
because
is.
I remember when I was in college and I wanted, and we were told to write a report on somebody who was not American. And I was trying to find Black people that I could write the report on. And my instructor says, "Oh, see, you're just part of the Black experience, you know." And I found that a lot, especially in academia, when African Americans choose to tell African American stories, people they get accused of just writing race related stories. But the thing is, what we're wanting to do is delve more into our history, and we want to tell our stories because if we don't tell our stories, who will?
It won't be told, or they'll be
Right.
told from a one-dimensional, or just
Exactly.
same old
Exactly. I mean,
narrative.
I didn't know who Adam Clayton Powell was until I had to write a report on him when I was younger. There are certain people, if it weren't for certain movies, young people wouldn't know who these people were.
That's true.
And then sometimes they'll watch the movie and they'll get so enraptured with the person, they say, I want to learn more about them. And this is why it's important for us to tell our stories and to include snippets of these real people in your story. So I'm glad that you're doing that.
Absolutely. You know, I don't know how to tell a story without bringing the reality of the time period, whether I'm writing about the past or if I'm writing about what's happening now. You know, we don't exist in isolation, and so neither
Yes.
do our characters. So I'm always trying to find ways to give readers. So for example, this, as I mentioned, this book has been called a romance, and I'm okay with that because labels are important. It helps readers find your book. But what I'm hoping as readers delve into it, they'll see that romance is just a component,
Right.
that you got to understand the people to understand the love that they shared between each other. And you've got to see the challenges that they both faced in terms of Eva wanting to really avoid the being a married woman. That wasn't something that was on her agenda of things that she wanted to do. Meanwhile, her sister was a pastor's wife, And that was very much in her wheelhouse of course you're going to be married. That's the goal of a woman. And I
Right.
wanted to be able to illustrate, coming out of World War II, women, Black women included, were beginning to see that there's other things that we can do in life besides be a wife, besides be a mother. And then for my white senator, I wanted him to have to grapple with systemic racism and the privilege of being a white man, and to have people like Adam Clayton Powell Jr. push back at him and say, you know, you don't get to use us for, you know, for window dressing, then you don't dig in and really help us with the issues that are important. Black people were being lynched at alarming rates. And he
Yes.
said, you can't be a liberal politician and not be concerned about Black people swinging in trees in your own neck of the woods.
Right, and act like it's not happening. You know, I've noticed that Mary McLeod Bethune is getting a lot more attention and love and recognition, like all recently. You know, she was in the series they had, the First Lady, about the three First Ladies, Michelle, it was Eleanor Roosevelt and Betty Ford that was portrayed, but she was in that. And then they just did the statue of her unveiled one in
Yeah.
DC. They just recently
Mhm.
unveiled the statue about her.
Oh, it's
She's-
about time that she gets her due.
I agree. It's just like it's what took so long, you know?
Right. Well, it's back to what you originally said, is that when we're not telling our stories, if we're not driving the narrative, then of course our leaders and our heroes and sheroes are not going to get the recognition that they deserve. When I wrote When Stars Rain Down about Black domestic workers, I wanted to be able to take back the narrative, specifically the narrative that had subverted what it meant to be those strong women who worked as housekeepers and nannies. And I grew up with those women. You know, I went to the houses that they cleaned, and I saw how they were treated firsthand. And the idea that someone else would snatch that story from us and give it a
And the
spin
help
that, well, there you go, and give it a spin that had nothing to do with the reality of the situation.
Right.
So it's, you know, it's what I believe it was Toni Morrison who said, if there's a book that you want to read and it hasn't been written, write it yourself.
Mhm.
And, you know, and I was fortunate enough to have the talent to write. So how dare I not use it to take back the narrative?
So now this is your second book. So,
No, well, it's my
you have
third,
other books. Okay.
it's my third book of fiction
Okay.
and my fourth book total, because I have a collection of poetry.
Okay. All right. Oh, this sounds fascinating. Now, is this Cortland Hardison Kingsley the fourth? That's the person that's the white senator in your book. That's a mouthful right there. Sounds like he's from Old Money. That's
Exactly. One other storyline that I followed in the book, and that will come out in future books, is his grandfather fathered a lot of the Black Parsons or Parsons that lived in that community. So Cortland grew up with Black cousins who worked on his family's farm that was at one time a plantation. And that is a story that doesn't often get told. And having grown up in rural Alabama, I can't tell you how many Black, white relatives that lived in my community, but everybody just pretended like they didn't exist.
or that they hatched. You know,
Exactly.
I wrote a op-ed years ago. I forgot what the situation was. It was related to something in the news. And I said in the article the reason why Black people are all different shades, it's because of the plantation system and all of those children that were fathered that weren't acknowledged
Right.
by the slave
Mhm.
master. And I had a white person email me and say they just never thought about why Black people were different colors. And I believe they were saying the truth.
Yeah,
They
I
just,
mean, they really just didn't think about it.
we hatched,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So
It's because it's a painful conversation for all sides. You know, even in my own family, people are more comfortable saying we have Native American heritage, only to do these, these 21, whatever to
21
find
and
out
me
your
or
DNA.
23
And then
and me.
find out you don't have an ounce of any type of Native American, so it's like, and then you find out you're 20%, 30% European. And it's like, well, where did that come from? So let's start having those conversations.
Right.
And for me, literature has always been a way to have conversations about things that are difficult. I was saved by Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Some very troubling things happened to me as a teenager. And if I had not had that book, because grown people weren't having those conversations with young
Right.
people.
Mhm.
So it was through the book that I was able to understand some of the things that had taken place and be able to process it. So I always think about there's another little girl out there, or there's another young person out there who might be able to read something that I've written and be able to see themselves in it and connect to it.
A lot of times that's the beauty about fiction, is that it's so much easier to digest when the story isn't real, but you feel the realness in it. So I know I guess that's why I like what you're doing with your work, because you inject realism into the story, even if it's a fiction story, because sometimes that's the only way we're going to be able to ingest it.
Absolutely. I was writing The Light Always Breaks during the election, this last election. COVID was going on, the election was going on.
Mhm.
And as I wrote about the Democratic Party of 1948 that split because the Southern Democrats did not want to join forces with, I guess you would say, the Northern or more liberal Democrats in terms of racism.
Mhm.
And I'm looking at the same things happening right now. And so whenever someone says to me, why are you still writing about the past? It's because everything is coming full circle. And it always does. It always will, until we start, facing the fact that these
Right.
issues are not going to go away.
We can't pretend that the past didn't happen.
No.
Exactly.
The past is what makes us who we are today. So we have to know it. It doesn't mean that we have to live based on what happened in the past, but if we don't know where we came from, we don't know where we're going.
Right.
In the past,
Right.
it's some very rich storytelling in the past. And like I said, we were talking about that earlier, how our history is always looked at from a tragic standpoint. And
Mhm.
yes, there is tragedy, but what about the people who overcame the tragic situation?
Yeah.
What about the people who saved? What about the people who were slaves, who could hire their time out, and their masters decided to let them receive some fun, and they saved for 20 years to buy their freedom? Talk about delayed gratification.
I tell people I am proud to be a descendant of individuals who survived the Middle Passage. Maybe I am a descendant of kings and queens. I don't know. But I'm a descendant of someone who survived something that was meant to destroy them. I am the survivor of sharecropper. My daddy was a sharecropper. He had a 10th grade education, and now his daughter is teaching in universities where before the only thing he would have been able to do is mop the floor. And you think I'm not going to be proud of that and not want to write about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You're right.
Absolutely.
You're right. Now, my dad was a sharecropper's son. Um, well, he sharecropped too. Well, he never sharecropped the land. His dad sharecropped, and he worked the land. They he used to always talk about he wanted to get from behind that mule. That was a measure. And he always wanted an education. He just didn't like the fact that the little white kids that were the people who owned the land, those little white kids were riding their bicycles or getting a bus to school while he was in the tobacco fields. And he just, at 9 and 10 years old. So, but my dad ultimately got his PhD. So he went from being a sharecropper's son to having a PhD and being very successful. So but he was determined. And when he got his education, he was already married with children when he got his bachelor's. So he was working 2 jobs. He was a pastor to a couple of rural churches, that couldn't pay much. And he was going to school at the same time. So when people say they can't do something or something's too hard, you can do whatever you are determined to do. You have to have a plan. You have to be willing to work. You have to delay gratification. You can't party all the time and then think it's going to happen. That's not the way the life is.
Now, I was listening to you talk to Vanessa earlier about, all the books that she has coming out. And, like her, I spend a lot of time writing. I tell people this is not for the faint of heart. When everyone else is out enjoying themselves, I'm researching or I'm writing, but it brings me joy. But it's hard work to make a story have the rich history, but also be entertaining,
Right.
And you can, and sometimes there's hit and misses, sometimes you don't always get it right, but it's a constant effort to do the work, and so I'm always appreciative when I hear other writers talk about their process, because it validates that, yes, that's what you have to do if you want to have 3-4 books come out in 1 year.
The goal is always to make the next book just a little better than the last book, and the next book after that will be a little better than the last book, and you just keep improving, and that's the beauty of writing, and that's why I take writing so seriously.
Yeah, and your work that you're doing makes your readers happy. Reading a good book is just there's nothing that you can compare it to. If you're a reader and you are reading a good book, and you just hate for it to end. And after you read a good book, you're really looking for another good book. You don't want to just read a blah book, just an okay book after you've read an awesome book. And so you don't always get the 5 stars, but you're always searching for one. And Absolutely. People are I'm just excited that so many people are writing and doing quality writing and putting out amazing work. And that's something that we've hoped that we brought to the public with this show, that there's so much out there that people can tap into and support writers so that they can continue to write these books. So Absolutely. it takes, because I know, especially if you're with a big publisher, they're looking at numbers. They want numbers, and they want numbers fairly early. When the book comes out, the first month or so, they're looking at sales. And if you're self-published, you have a little more leeway, but you still need to sell books. You got to eat, you got to pay your bills.
And the lens on for writers of color, the ability for us to fail, the margin is a lot smaller for our white counterparts. I mean, let's just be real. A white author can have 5-6 failures, and the publisher will often work with them until they get to the place where they have that success. We're expected to come out of the gate succeeding. So that's why it's so important for our Black bookstagrammers and bloggers to get the word out. Even if you don't personally like the book yourself, just share the book and say, hey, it wasn't my cup of tea, but maybe you should try it out. Every little bit of support. This is why
I don't publicly slam books. If I didn't happen to like it because somebody else may happen to like the book. And then I don't want to bash another author. Now, if you ask me in private, what did I think of the book?
Yeah.
I'll tell you, but I'm not going to go on Facebook and say, this book was garbage. Don't
Right, I
waste your
don't either.
money.
I don't need, well, I did once, but that as a standard thing, principle, I don't do that either. So we are at the end of our time. We want to make sure people know how to get your book. The Light Always Breaks. Show us the cover again. And
Yes,
it's
and you
available.
can go to my website, www.angelajacksonbrown.com. You'll see all the links to purchase the book wherever you like. I always encourage you to go to your independent bookstores that are local. But if you like that big box store on the internet, you go there too, and you can get it within a few days. And it's also available as an Audible book and a Kindle book.
Okay.
All
Well,
right.
thank
Well,
you,
I will
Angela.
be, I'm an audio book girl. So and I have a trip coming up this weekend. So
Okay.
yes, I am on the doggone road again, Gwen.
Oh boy, oh boy.
So I'm gonna have to listen to this book on the way to where I'm going. I can't be telling everybody where I'm going, y'all.
I know. Well, you travel safely, Dr. Lawson.
I will. Thank you, and congratulations. I'm really looking forward to listening to the books. My schedule's so crazy, I don't get a chance to sit down and read, but I will listen to the mess out of an audiobook.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. And again, happy anniversary.
Okay, thank you. Have a great evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so we're going to bring on our last guest shortly. I wanted to find out if someone won the $50 book.
Yeah, somebody won it. I have to scroll and see because there's been a lot of chatter since that response was posted.
Okay.
I think it was a double winner tonight, but let me check.
Who won the Zuri Ray book?
The what? Oh, I don't know. Hold on.
The children's book. Okay. So total. I'm trying to go back and find out who won.
Okay, Mary Evans won the Women Could Fly book.
Okay, I knew that.
Okay, and then people started posting names instead of book clubs.
Yeah, I don't see the book club listed yet. No,
okay, Mary Evans was the first person to post a correct book club. She said, "Go on, girl, book club."
That's correct. So she was the first one. Okay. Book
and
Mania.
Then Rhonda McKnight came back and said, "Driven Divas."
Yeah. Well, who was first? The person who was first gets it. Mary was first. So Mary, you get your prize is a book worth $50 or less, any book, and DM me the book you want, and it will be on its way to you.
But I don't think anybody answered. I'm going to repost the question.
Okay.
I don't think anybody answered the second question.
Okay. All right. So our final guest is Misty Bellinger, and she has a book called New to Liberty, which came out earlier this year. And I saw the picture that you had, Demisty, before you came on. What was that, a cat or a dog?
Yeah, that was Alyosha's Al Kitty. That's my cat.
Wow, that's the name of your cat?
Yes.
That's
we
quite
adopted
a name.
him. Yeah, when we adopted him, he was named Al Capone. And just look at my hair. And we decided to rename him, so we came up with Alyosha's.
Well, I'm a cat lover. That's why I thought it was a cat.
Yeah.
We have a cat named Amon.
Oh.
And that's our first male cat. Our other cat that we had for 15 years, her name was Layla, and she passed away. That was the sad. So she passed away a couple of years ago. So we got another cat. My daughter is really my daughter's cat, but it's a family cat, but it's hers.
So, yeah, same here.
So when she moves out, whenever that is, she will take the cat with her, and then I'll probably get another cat because I've always had cats. So I love cats. So Zuri, okay, you reposted the other question. So welcome to Black Authors Matter TV.
Thank you. This is really exciting. I'm enjoying the conversations that you're having tonight.
We're kind of deep, huh?
Yes.
Now, I really enjoy the conversations that we have on this show because the authors who come on this show take writing seriously. And it's not just about making the next dollar for them. They really take their craft seriously. And so I just enjoy just geeking out and having a good writing conversation, a good literary conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, so do you have a copy of your book with you?
I do. So this is New to Liberty.
Okay.
It's,
And this is also historical fiction.
yes.
So we had a historical fiction night, except for our first guest, which was history. That was about history.
It just wasn't fiction.
When
Right.
It was
right. Yeah.
you know, real fiction, real history. But tell us about and this was
Real
my
history.
plan. Oh, sorry. It's not fictional. I'm sorry. What did I say? I didn't think it was that funny. So
It's late.
okay.
Yeah, we're getting loopy. Don't mind us. So
right.
tell us about your book, Miss Misty.
Okay.
To Liberty.
Yep. So
Well,
this book is divided into 3 parts, and it follows 3 different women, young women. One is about 19 years old, I think, and she's in a May-December relationship, and she is traveling across the country with this man, this white man, but she, up until very recently, was sure that she was white. And so there's some question of heredity in that, in her story. The second woman in the book is obviously Black, and her family moves from Wisconsin to Kansas, and she falls in love with a white man. And it's kind of a brutal story, but I think, I don't know. And then the last story is they are unraced, but they're white. I don't really mention a race. And it's about 2 women who fall in love during the Dust Bowl. So it moves throughout time, starting in 1966, and it moves back to 1947 with the Black girl, Nella. And then it moves further back into the Dust Bowl, and all the stories are interconnected, and all the people deal with each other. And I have to admit, this started off in grad school. I never thought I will write historical fiction. I always wanted to, well, since middle school, I wanted to write social criticism. But when I was in grad school working on my comprehensive exams for my PhD, I studied working class fiction. And I just got enamored with the Dust Bowl and that whole period, and that lifestyle and suffering through it, and how in some ways it kind of leveled the playing field for many people, regardless of their heritage. But in other ways, it was still racism as this was going on. And yeah, so I think I'll stop there. I'm very nervous.
No, I was actually going to ask you to talk a bit about the Dust Bowl period for because maybe I'm familiar with it, but I don't think I'm familiar with the term.
Okay, so the Dust Bowl kind of is it happened. It's kind of a perfect storm, like it is now with inflation. There's lots of reasons why we have inflation. During the Dust Bowl, there's lots of reasons why there was extreme poverty across the globe. And that started in 1929 with the stock market crash. But the Dust Bowl, from my understanding and from my research, a lot of it happened because when the land was colonized by white Americans, they didn't know how to be stewards of that land. So they planted crops that the soil could not handle. So what happened is that the soil pretty much depleted, and created these horrible dust storms. And in the book, I note one of the dust storms that happened, but from the point of view of a family of Greta and her little brother and her mother. They're stuck in a dust storm, and they were horrible storms where people died or got sick, or they got dust in their lungs. And it was when I mean by a perfect storm, you had the banks trying to, it was very similar to subprime lending as far as I'm concerned, where the banks were trying to collect on the farms. They weren't producing crops. And a lot of the country, a lot of the people were traveling to find work in other places. Some people tried to stay and handle the land, but it was horrible. And the thing that inspired this book actually is in my research, I was reading Egan's The Worst Hard Time, which is about the Dust Bowl in the Great Plains. And I learned about the jackrabbit roundup, where thousands of jackrabbits will come and eat the little crops that the farmers had. And so instead of shooting them, they will round them up and they'll beat them to death. And I thought, what kind of person will grow out of this, and how do they experience life after that point, having living through such extreme poverty and such violence? What do they grow up into? And
it seems like it'd be more logical if you're poor and destitute to eat the rabbits.
Yeah. And some people did, but some people were afraid of
about them eating the crops.
Yeah. Some people were afraid of what they call rabbit fever or tularemia, which is a wasting disease that the rabbits had.
Okay. Okay.
It was yeah. Go ahead.
You mentioned something that I never have heard of, and that doesn't mean anything, but because I don't know what they're teaching at colleges these days, because it's been a while since I went. But you talked about working class fiction. I've never heard of anything like that. What is that?
That is fiction that is focused on people who are either the working poor or working class, people who have to work for a living. As something that I have always been interested in, because that's my background. I will, no matter how much money I make, and I'm not making a lot of money, come on, I'm in academia, I will always identify as working class. I think that's part of my roots. I grew up rather poor in the inner city in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and my parents both work. And it's one of those arguments that you learn pretty early on in college when you go and you learn about feminism, where women fought for the right to work, and you think about it. Well, my mother always worked. My grandmother always worked. The women in my life worked. You had to work, otherwise you're not making money. And a lot of times, the women were the primary breadwinners. And I think those stories, at least personally, are more real to me and more interesting to me. And I followed that writing. I read stuff like that since I was a kid, from Richard Wright, and I would consider Alice Walker a working class writer in some aspects. I would consider Toni Morrison working class. I would consider even Stephen King sometimes, come on. But people who have to have jobs, who don't have the luxury to not work or to have extended vacations. And one of the things that I like about class issues and fiction is that it transcends race, but it also puts it in the forefront. The same with women, the same with sexuality. It's something that is always there. And I have not experienced wealth, so I don't even know how to write from that perspective. I can guess, I can do research, but I don't think, personally, there's enough people who are writing from that perspective that I don't think we need it. And also television shows. I grew up with Good Times and Happy Days and 227. I was just thinking about this show the other day. Those are our working class shows. Those are the shows that I felt kind of mimic the life that I grew up in.
I like that you mentioned that many people try to write from the perspective of wealth. And often I can kind of tell when the author's trying to write from that perspective, but they don't really have wealth themselves because they kind of romanticize it. And they make it seem like everybody has butlers and drivers, and they can just write out checks for $1,000 without blinking. And everybody doesn't live that lifestyle. And there are even some people who do have that type of money who are still not living that lifestyle.
Right.
I mean, if you look at let's say Candy Burris, for example, you don't see butlers walking around her house. She has a team, she has a staff, but she doesn't have a driver. She doesn't have a butler. But we try to write from that perspective because we think that everybody who has money is just automatically living that way, and it doesn't come across as authentic.
Right. And it's not, I think that people write from that because a lot of, however lofty we want to be in our writing, and I do want to be lofty in my writing. It's what we see. We want to mimic or not mimic, but at least we want to enter the conversation. All of writing is a conversation. We want to enter in that conversation, and we want to be entertained, and we're watching what is entertainment and what the conversation is. And often it is very wealthy people. We think about all the shows that we watch for the most part, or even the superhero stuff right now. Batman is a billionaire, right? Yeah. So I think
Batman is a very rich man.
Yes. Oh yeah.
You make a very good point there.
So is this your first book?
This is my first novel.
Okay.
And it's I've published a couple of books of poetry. I have a chapbook, a very small one called Rubbing Elbows. And in 2016, I wrote, I'm gonna show you another book.
Okay, yes. So.
I wrote the poetry book, Peculiar Heritage. And this book is, I wrote it in 2016. In November, I started writing it. Because at first, I'm one of very few people who look like me in my community, my adopted community. And my colleagues and friends were saying, well, how did we get to this point where we can elect someone, I'm not trying to be political, but where you could elect someone like Donald Trump? And at first I was thinking, yeah, how can we get to this point? And I thought, no, this is our heritage. This makes sense. Especially after having Barack Obama, it makes sense that Americans would go for someone who is as far right as Donald Trump.
Right.
I think
you went from one extreme to another extreme.
Right, exactly. And the peculiar comment, for some reason, I started writing neo. I never wrote neo-slavery stuff before this, but when he was elected, I started writing neo-slavery poems when Donald Trump was, I don't know what it was. And then I put those two things together, that this is our heritage. Of course, we have this moment now, but also it stems from slavery. We have never healed from that completely. So I feel like this is our heritage, and this is just another moment that we have to live through, or not have to live through, or forced to live through, I would say. And we have to get through it. We have to somehow surpass this and overcome this. And
well, you have to look at it this way, from the standpoint of I try to take a step back and look at it unemotionally. I used to do a lot of writing, political writing, and every presidential election is a response to the previous president.
Right.
Every election. So Biden was a response to Trump. Right. And so whoever gets elected on this next turn will be a response to Biden. Because Obama was a response to George W. Bush.
Exactly.
That's
why our next president is going to be 35 years old. The youngest you can be. You can be at least 35 to be president.
You have to be at least 35.
35, yeah. Oh my gosh.
Well, I don't know about the age part, but it will be a response to President Biden. So
they're like, no more old people. That's exactly what's going to happen.
And that's true of that's true of the presidency. It's not the same for other offices as
Right.
much. But for
Right.
the president of the United States, the person elected is always a response to the previous president. And
Mhm.
so this is how we get where we are from place to place, from president to president. This is how it works. And we can, this country is a two-party system. So it
Mhm.
goes back and forth. I mean, in a two-party system, the
Mhm.
other party is going to win about half the time.
Mhm.
So you have to just look at it from just philosophically, just historically, just from a patterns and trends. You have to look at it like that and not let the elections make you sad or make you angry or even emotional. Because guess what? That pendulum is going to swing back.
Yeah.
That's just what happens. It does. So, Demisty, how did you get your name?
My mother wanted to name me something like, let me get it, Defaja? I don't know. She wanted to name me something weird. And my father, so glad he was there. He wanted to name me Misty. So it was a compromise. I went a few days without a name.
Oh, but that's why you name your cat like multiple names. That's where that tradition comes from.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I've ever seen the name Demisty. And I'm
Yeah.
always intrigued by people who have unusual names
Mhm.
and how they came about.
Yeah. I have 3 sisters and they have very traditional names. So yeah, I was the last one and I got this weird name.
You were special.
Yeah.
So, what do you hope people gain when they read Nude to Liberty? What message do you want them to get from reading it?
I want them to leave with a sense of hope. Like we were going to have our trials and tribulations, but we're going to survive that. And we have to define our lives for ourselves. And I'm not going to soften the edges in it. There's a lot of rough stuff that happens in this book, but each of these women learn to define herself and gets through it. And I think that the idea of hope is what I want people to hold on to. And I hope they like reading that. I don't know. I hope they find some joy in reading the book itself. A lot of the writers that I read growing up and who I appreciated, also a lot of times it seems really gloomy, it seems very dreary. But if you stop and think about the work that you've read, it is also hopeful. Even, a book as harrowing as Beloved, we end on kind of an up note there. And there's going to be a future. So yeah, that's kind of how I want them, help people to leave with this book too.
Okay. Well, tell people how they can connect with you. Are you on social media or what the platforms you're on, and how they can get a copy of Nude to Liberty.
Okay, so I have a website, it's demistybellinger.com.
Okay.
I am on Twitter too much. I am at Demisty B on Twitter. I have Instagram, but I think I've aged out of Instagram. I don't know. That's too much for me. I think I'm getting too old for it.
Well, they say Facebook is for old people.
Yeah.
Oh. That's what they say.
That's what my daughter tells me. And TikTok, I guess, I don't know.
Oh no.
That's really for kids, but this is so much on there.
Yeah.
The only thing I watch on TikTok are cat videos. Since you like cats, I can tell you that. There's some really interesting cat videos on TikTok.
I guess book talk is a thing. Like people advertise books on TikTok.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, it's a big thing that I had no idea. What a way to market books. But if you wanted to, I am bad at marketing. If you wanted to buy Nude to Liberty, you can go to it's at bookpage.com. I like supporting them. because they
Okay.
support independent bookshops. Also Amazon is at Barnes and Noble. If it's not at your Barnes and Noble, it's at my Barnes and Noble. It's at other. So when I see it on the shelf, that's kind of like, oh my gosh, there I am. And
Oh, that's
All
exciting.
you have to do is just go to the Barnes and Noble desk and ask for the book. If it's
right.
being sold, it's in the system.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah. And as the writer said before me, or two writers before me, go to your independent, your favorite independent, if you have one, your independent bookshop, and ask to order the book, see if they can put it on their shelves. That would help support me. And lastly, the library. Ask your libraries.
Okay. Well, thank you for being a guest on Black Authors Matter TV. It was a very interesting interview. We are excited about your new book, your new
Thank you.
venture, and just welcome to the world of writing and publishing. And don't be nervous or shy. On this
No.
platform, we
This is
want
a
to
friendly,
Yeah.
friendly area.
Yes, we want to make authors look their very best and sell books. That's what this
All right.
is all about.
Thank
Your
you.
best presentation. And so people can know about you, so that they
Mhm.
can know about the person behind the book.
Yeah.
This is important.
Yep. Thank you, and happy anniversary. 2 years.
Thank you. We're excited. We never even met when we started this show.
Yeah.
We never even thought about getting to 2 years. Maybe Rhonda did, but I did. We just kept doing it.
Yeah,
But
we
the
were
2
doing
years
it, and
went so
it
fast.
started to catch on, and
Yeah.
there we were.
Yeah.
Good.
Now we've interviewed almost 400 guests. So
Wow.
yeah.
So last thing I want to say, I'm glad that you reached out, because I didn't know about you, but this is something I always share with my students. I really
Wonderful. Thank you.
thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for being on the show.
Yep. Thank you. Bye.
Have a
Okay.
great
Have a
night.
great evening.
All right, you too.
Okay, well, we ended a little bit early, although what I wanted to do is just tell people a little bit about what we did at the Zeta Boulé in terms of there were thousands of women there, and there were several authors at our booth. Mark Bosjor, I think that's how you pronounce his name.
Yeah.
He's actually an anniversary follower. He was listed as that in the Facebook comments, but he was there. Janae, I don't know Janae's last. I knew the
Janae
first name.
Harden,
Janae Harden, Brandy,
Brandy
her
Martin,
last name, and then Deborah.
Deborah McDaniel.
Okay, and Kevin Wayne Johnson. I know his name because I've known him
Yes.
for a long time. But it was really interesting with all the thousands of.
We can't forget Shayla Edmonds.
Oh yeah, Shayla Edmonds. I did forget. So yeah, it was a lot. We were at one booth, but there were several authors. I was there every single day, and I sold almost 200 books. I was excited. I sold out of books. And today I got a call from one of the people who bought all of my children's books, and she talked to the mayor of her town. Well, it's not that small a town, Pine Bluff, Arkansas. And they want to have my children's books in their youth programs, and they want to have me come out and speak, and they're going to pay my expenses. That was just, great. That happened from this week, from me signing books at the Zeta Boulé. So it was all good. It was exciting meeting people that you got to talk about your work.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, the authors were very, very happy. No, almost everybody either sold out of their books or came very close to selling out of their books.
Right.
And they were very excited about that. The authors seemed to work together. The Zetas were very open and receptive to them, and I was happy about that as well. So I want to thank all of the authors who supported the booth, as well as the Zetas who came out and supported the booth, because this would not have been possible without all of you.
We had a lot of support. We had a
Yes.
lot of support, and it was just great. And I'm glad to be back in Texas, because it's no place like home. So
Absolutely.
Anyway,
And just so you know,
go ahead.
before we end, we did get an answer to the last trivia question. I want to say it was Tony Benita, but I'm trying to go back to make sure. Yep, no, I'm sorry. It was Lydia Brew.
Oh, okay.
Lydia Brew
About
said New
Missouri,
Jersey.
this Missouri, right?
Yes.
Okay,
New
Lydia.
Jersey.
Okay. We will send the books out. And Mary Evans won the prize for getting any book of her choice up to $50 for our second anniversary show. So
Yay.
yay. So anyway, we'll be back next week at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern with another episode of Black Authors Matter TV. I'm Gwen Richardson signing off.
And I'm Dr. Rhonda Lawson. Have a wonderful evening and a great week.
We'll see you next week.
Thank you for tuning in and join us next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern for another edition of Black Authors Matter TV.